I'm talking to John Hagel, who works at the big accounting and management consulting firm of Deloitte, and he is the director of the Center for the Edge at Deloitte. John, what exactly is the Center for the Edge?
It's a research center based here in Silicon Valley that's focused on identifying emerging business opportunities that should be on the CEO's agenda but are not. And our task is to do the research required to persuade executives to put it on the agenda.
Can you name some of those emerging opportunities?
Sure, it's a wide range of potential opportunities, some of them very technology driven. So cloud computing would be an interesting example of a technology driven opportunity. And then we have focused on opportunities that have to do with different approaches to strategy, business strategy. We call them shaping strategies, where you shape an entire market or industry as opposed to just focusing on building your own company.
Now, you're involved with TED Women, and I know that your work has something to do with increasing opportunities for women. How does that work out at Center for the Edge?
Well, it's a byproduct of some of the work we've been doing around trying to understand the longer-term changes that are occurring in the business landscape. One of the things that we did recently was just try to ask the most basic question of how are companies doing? Not just this quarter, not just this year, but over a long period of time. And what we found when we looked at all public companies in the United States since 1965, if you look at it in terms of return on assets as a measure of financial performance, return on assets has collapsed over that time period. It's now 75% lower than it was in 1965.
And you're doing research to try to figure out how to correct that?
Try to understand why it's happening and then how to correct it.
Can you tell us why it's happening?
Well, part of it has to do with that competition is intensifying. Over this time period, competition has roughly doubled in intensity. But more fundamentally, what we've discovered is that the basis of competition is shifting. And what we're finding is the model of business that we had in the 20th century, which was really what we would call focused on knowledge stocks. In other words, the key to building a company was you had to develop some proprietary knowledge. You had to protect that knowledge, make sure nobody else could get access to it, and then you had to efficiently extract the knowledge and deliver it to the marketplace, the value from that knowledge. The problem is, in a world that's more rapidly changing, any knowledge stock, anything you know today, is going to depreciate at an accelerating rate. Anything we know becomes obsolete at a more rapid rate. So in that kind of environment, the focus for creating economic value is participating in knowledge flows. How do you find and connect into knowledge flows that can allow you to learn faster and refresh your knowledge stocks more rapidly?
Could you give any specific examples of that?
Of knowledge flows, participating in knowledge flows?
How this 21st century model is different from the last century.
So there's a company that we've been studying. It turns out many of the most interesting companies that are kind of exploring this edge are in China and India. There's a company in the apparel industry called Li & Fung that has built over time a global network of 10,000 business partners. So there's incredible flows of knowledge across this global network that's all orchestrated by this one company, Li & Fung, to support apparel designers around the world.
Now, doesn't the internet enable that for any company?
It certainly makes it a lot easier. What's particularly remarkable about Li & Fung is their advanced technology is the telephone and the fax machine. They have basically been very reluctant to use a lot of technology because they think it's too rigid. And they prize flexibility, so they've been doing this all in very low-tech ways. But we think combining that with what the internet offers actually takes it to an even higher performing level.
So are you saying that companies in Asia are outcompeting American companies because they're using a different and more effective business model?
That's right. It's something that I think most Western executives are very slow to acknowledge, that actually what's going on in these countries, at least in some areas, I mean, I don't want to generalize and say it's across the entire economy, but there are a set of companies in a very diverse set of industries. I talked about apparel. We're looking at this in everything from the automobile industry to motorcycles, financial services, agricultural products. So it's across enough different industries that we have a sense this is a powerful model that is broadly applicable.
Now, it used to be that the whole world looked to America as being the model and they copied us.
Right.
Are you saying that now we need to copy them?
We certainly need to understand what they're doing and perhaps hopefully go beyond what they're doing. But I think the starting point is at least recognizing that they're doing something quite different and very powerful in terms of a different way of building economic value.
Is there anything complicated about what they're doing that we couldn't replicate very easily?
No, the most complicated part is it challenges some of the most basic mindsets we have, the basic assumptions we have about what's required to be successful in business. So this whole notion of knowledge flows. I mean, when I talk to executives, they'll often say, I've got it. So I need to go out and have meetings with the smartest people in my market or industry, and I'll get them to tell me everything they know about the market or industry. But I couldn't tell them what I know because that's proprietary knowledge. That's competitive advantage if I start talking about that. So you can imagine there's not going to be a lot of flow of knowledge if all you're doing is taking from somebody else.
Now, where do women figure in all of this? Because I know your work centers on women a lot.
Yeah.
Are there some business models that are more amenable to women than others?
Well, it gets to this notion of knowledge flows, and one of the things we've discovered as we've gone into this is that the knowledge that's most valuable actually is not data that kind of flows through the internet. It's what we call tacit knowledge, knowledge that we each have in our heads that are a result of recent experience that we haven't even processed ourselves. We have a very hard time expressing it to ourselves, much less expressing it to somebody else. That knowledge doesn't flow unless there are trust-based relationships. And the process of building trust-based relationships involves things like expressing vulnerability. If you don't express vulnerability to the other person, if you're just saying, I'm in total control, I've got everything solved here, you don't trust that person.
And the usual paradigm is that expressing vulnerability is a fatal weakness.
Exactly. That's the old model of, you read any business school text, they say you have to project strength, force, that you have everything under control.
Now, what drives business success in this new model? Some people say, well, you measure your success by your stock price, or the quarterly production of units sold, or customer satisfaction, lack of complaints, or the fact that your employees are happy and like coming to work.
Yeah.
So does this research you're doing have anything to say about what is the key measure of success that tells you not only that you're doing well today, but that you're likely to continue doing well in the future?
Right. For us, as we've studied the trends that are playing out in the business world, increasingly the focus has to be on operating performance improvement. Financial performance is kind of a lagging indicator. It tells you how you did in the past. If you want to know how you're going to do going forward, focus on operating metrics, things like how rapidly are you acquiring new customers, or how long do you hold on to a customer. Sometimes customers leave you very quickly, other times they stay for lifetime.
One of the critical weaknesses in the American system of doing business is that the interests of management and labor are often opposed.
Right.
And that doesn't sound like a very efficient way to run a company. You would think that all of the people who work at the company would share a common interest.
Right.
Instead of being adversarial.
Right. Now, it's an interesting issue, and one of the things we've written about is what we call the Dilbert paradox, which is that if you ask any executive, senior executive, what their top priorities are, almost inevitably they'll say talent is one of our top priorities. We're in a war for talent. We have to make sure we have best talent in the world. And so that's one piece of information. The other piece is then how do you explain the enormous popularity of items like Dilbert or The Office, which so graphically communicate the stultifying effect of our work environment on talent? There's a paradox here. And so part of our research has been to understand why that disconnect occurs. And a lot of it has to do, first of all, with who do we consider to be talent? Often executives, when you press them to say, okay, so who's the talent? It's the knowledge workers, the more educated workers. It's not the whole workforce.
Now, there's a theory that says that virtually everybody can be productive if they feel motivated.
Yes.
So it's not that the people working for you now aren't smart enough,
Right.
Maybe they just don't have enough motivation, and they would do
Right.
better if you were motivating them.
Right. So one of the stories we tell is the notion of the increasing importance of passion in work. And Western executives will often say, well, yeah, you can be passionate if you're a scientist or if you're a software engineer, but give me a break. The person on the front line of an assembly line operation is never going to be passionate about that work. And so if you look at the experience that Toyota had when they went into the automobile industry, they said, okay, we're going to take this frontline assembly line worker and we're going to redefine their job. You know, yes, they have some manual routine activities they have to do to keep the assembly line
But
working.
he would be responsible.
Yes, but their real job is on identifying problems, and not just identifying problems, but solving those problems. And if they run into a challenge, all they need to do is pull a cord. Every worker on the front line has a cord that they can pull, and that stops the entire assembly line until a team comes to that worker and helps solve that problem. So they've got a sense not only that they've got an opportunity to make a difference, but that the whole company is there to support them in terms of making a difference. Passion levels went way up in those workers. Now, Detroit and the automobile companies responded and said, well, yeah, but those are Japanese. It's a different culture. Could never get an American worker passionate about these kinds of things. So Toyota comes to the U.S. and starts building automobile plants here in the U.S. with American workers. Passion goes way up on the front lines.
All right, hopefully Americans will learn something, be more successful. Well, this has been a great interview. We're going to wrap. Thank you very much.
Thank
Enjoyed
you.
it.
Appreciate it. Absolutely.